Welcome back to Twisted and Mysterious. This is part 2 of the podcast. Enjoy.
They have like 120 horses and riders and ATVs and people who came from all over the place, like as far away as like Hatch, to help search for her. There was no like Facebook outcry or text messaging chain or anything like that. This was literally just calling people and them calling people and them calling people.
And word of mouth.
And being able to gather that many people on such short notice to come from so far away to help search for this little girl. Okay, so the FBI, the state police had helicopters searching by air. Paul Vest, the boyfriend of Colleen, he went out south of town to search near Lake McMillan. People from Santa Fe were coming to help search county roads. Some volunteers from Albuquerque brought bloodhounds down to help search around the area. This was like a weird story. So it said that they came in the middle of the night, and at 3 a.m., they picked up her scent, Dena scent, at her house, and it led to a dead end at a home of an unidentified city employee. The person allowed the officers to search his home and property, but turned up nothing. And I don't know, like, nothing else was ever said about this, and maybe it meant nothing. But it was just, like, super weird. And then I thought about it, and I was like, well, when we were kids, we would go to random neighbors' houses. And so maybe at some point she had gone to, like, visit this guy or something. I don't know.
Because we had old neighbors that we would go to their houses to do just random things.
Yeah. But that was the only scent they picked up. So, like I was saying about the horses and the riders, so July 21st, the police had asked for volunteers to come. There were 120 of them. They gathered at 7:30 in the morning. And these people were ranged in age from 13 to 80 years old. And they were divided into teams. They were sent to search the 40 square mile area of Northwest Eddy County. But also at this point, the police not from the immediate area and even local police were being called back to do local things. Like they couldn't just keep doing all of this. And so the police were like being super heavily reliant on volunteers at this point to help search for her. And so electric company workers and oil field workers were checking in areas that they were familiar to. Farmers were mowing ditches. And then the FBI became more involved because they were like, well, it's been more than 24 hours, so it's possible she was taking over state lines. So Tuesday, July 22nd, I think we're 5 days past when she went missing. And Chief McKenzie gave an update on suspects. He said that they checked people, but they had alibis, and their list seemed to be growing instead of diminishing.
Right. They weren't ruling anybody out.
Right. Like, I mean, they were ruling some people out, but then it was like they were like more names were being added to their list. And at this point, of course, they're sure it's an abduction now because they would have found her otherwise. But they thought it was an isolated incident because things like this don't happen in a small town, you know? And so they were like, you know, and they don't think she ran away and, you know, nothing like that. So they had more horseback riders come and check like the south part of Eddy County. But this same day, so we're on July 22nd, Terry Clark's brother Steve visited the Chaves County Sheriff's Office with a tip. He said he had left town on July 17th to go to Hondo to like a cattle auction or something, and he left Terry on the ranch by himself. And when he returned on Tuesday the 22nd, he noticed that in the area of the ranch where they bury dead livestock, there was fresh digging, and that the tractor was left where it had been digging. And Steve also noticed a vulture and a strong odor coming from the site. And he had just learned of Dena's kidnapping because he had been gone.
Right.
So he just got back. And so he said, I guess he immediately went to the sheriff's office. You don't have a phone
with the internet on it, and so.
Me either, apparently. Officers were sent to the scene, and they uncovered the body of Dena in a shallow grave. The original affidavit filed by the DA's office stated, quote, physical evidence showed death to be a homicide consistent with sexual abuse. And basically, this meant that Dena was found naked with her hands and her feet bound. She had died from 3 gunshot wounds in close to her head. And her bindings were odd, but never explained. It said one of her wrists had bindings, but the other didn't. And her legs were bound, but they weren't bound together. Terry was arrested at 3 p.m. after determining that he was one of only few people who would have had access to that area of the ranch. After his arrest, Terry claimed that on July 17th, he had been on the ranch from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., and then he went to the house to eat dinner and watch TV, and he hadn't been in Artesia since July 9th because he didn't have any friends or relatives in the city. And
which we also know to be untrue.
We also know that to be untrue. And I was about to say, the police were quick to quash his alibi because guess what? Terry had a girlfriend who lived in Artesia.
Yes.
And so she lived just a block away from the Gore's house. Right. And he had been seen visiting her on July 17th, the day that Dena went missing, until about 5:30. And she even gave testimony that he had been there until she went to work.
So he's living with his brother and he has a girlfriend that we know of. Did he and his wife get divorced, or is he?
So I have it a little while later, but she did divorce him. It says
because she was, defending him during his first
right.
case.
So in June of 1985, when he was being sentenced for Donita Welch's kidnapping and rape, she had said that she would stick by him and give him all of her love and support. But in late May or early June of 1986, she divorced him.
She changed her mind.
She big fat changed her mind.
Good for her.
Yeah, because I also was like, he has a girlfriend, but he also has a wife with two kids.
And two children.
Yeah, so
and that happens, but
it sure does. And at some point, he had claimed that she was having an affair, and so he started seeing other women. And none of that was corroborated. But so anyway, so he has a girlfriend,
right,
in Artesia, and she testified that he was at her house until she went to work at about 5:30. And then later that night, he was seen at a bar that I guess Artesia used to have called the Country Connection after 10:30 p.m.
Right.
And so the time between 5:30 and 10:30 isn't accounted for. And so the Squaw Valley Ranch, is that what I called it?
Something like that.
It's kind of far out of town, but it's not that far. In 5 hours, he could have easily been there and back. Multiple times, yeah. So also, several people had also stated that they had seen Clark in Artesia multiple times between July 9th and 17th. He had a girlfriend and he had friends there. Mr. I don't have any friends there. And Chief McKenzie reported to the press that apparently in the weeks leading up to Dena's disappearance, there had been several reports of young girls being harassed while riding bikes or walking, but they couldn't determine if there was a connection until an 11-year-old girl came forward and said that a man in a blue and white International Scout near 33rd and Grand had chased her on July 14th, which was 3 days before Dena went missing.
33rd is kind of out in the boonies.
It is, yeah. It is kind of far out there. Pastor Teresa lived.
Mm-hmm. It's closer to where, our mom and them grew up.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Out on 42nd Street.
Yeah. But, that would have been out on the way to the ranch, too. Mm-hmm. If he was going out towards Hope. And also another blue and white car.
Mm-hmm.
His car
sort
of choice.
Of his MO.
Yeah. So, and witnesses did put Clark in Artesia on July 14th. And she picked him out of a photo array as well.
Right.
So he was also harassing children even then. He was arraigned in magistrate court on July 23rd on charges of first-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping. And guess what?
I bet they let him go.
They didn't. They didn't this time.
No. This time.
He was finally being held without bond because remember, you didn't have to bond somebody if it was first-degree murder.
Oh, right.
Right. So
this time he killed somebody.
That's right. The charges also made him eligible for the death penalty. And the state medical examiner also confirmed the identity of Dena on Wednesday. Also, conveniently or ironically or whatever we want to say, so remember he was free pending appeal to the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. Well, the day after Dena was found, the Supreme Court upheld the conviction on the first one. It was you could have done that.
You could have done that,
a week ago.
Months ago.
Yeah, at least a week ago.
One of the many times he went to court over this, then, he wouldn't have been murdering little girls or harassing other little girls. Or,
right.
Like I said, they made him somebody else's problem. And
mm-hmm. And that is also something that comes up later. So now they're sure Terry Clark's the bad guy, right? And they start looking for evidence tying him to the crime. They have eyewitnesses that put him in Artesia right before the kidnapping. And so he's visiting his girlfriend. And so randomly, and I'll let Farron talk about this, but all of our lives, we've heard this story, right?
Right.
I don't know. You want to go ahead?
Well, this case, like we said, was something that our mother brought up our entire lives to, as like a cautionary tale not to wander off. And then, it's been a while, but we were talking to her about wanting to cover this case. And it turns out that the girl that Terry Clark was dating during this murder was my mother's cousin.
Yeah.
And somehow, in all the years that our mother used this story as a cautionary tale, she never one time said, oh, yeah, my cousin was dating the murderer.
Yeah. And not only that, but Jackie, our uncle, so he was a talker, and he told us stories all the time, and he had a penchant for telling us the same stories over and over again. And one night, like not long before he had died, he was talking to us about this, and he like brought up like just very casually, oh yeah, like I used to hang out with Terry Clark. And I was just like, I didn't really like push it at the time. And like now I'm like, tell me more. But
unfortunately, he can't because he passed away himself.
But he probably hung out with them because they were all close with their cousins. And so since she was dating him, they probably hung out.
They probably met through their cousin who was dating the murderer.
Right. And so, like we said, she lived like half a block away from the Gore house. And they did search her house and, talk to her and everything. And they don't think that she had anything to do with it.
I don't think she had any idea that her boyfriend was this scumbag.
No. And unfortunately, her house just happened to put him into close proximity to this poor little girl.
Well, and what I think is scary is that she had little girls.
She did. She had two little girls.
Because her children are older than us.
Yeah. Not much.
But they were. And so she had two little girls at the time.
They would have been between like ours and Dena's ages. Like, so they would have been little girls.
I mean, I know they're both older than I am, but I don't know how close to your age they are.
Yeah, I think one of them is my age and the other one might be like 2 or 3 years older than me. But yeah, so it's crazy to us that it turned out to be even closer to home.
Yeah, like
than
it was already close
murder.
to home, being in our hometown and being something that, as I've said multiple times, our mother used as a cautionary tale. But then it turns out that this was, our family knew this guy.
Yeah, it's so crazy. And like mom doesn't appear to have known him. Like
she just knows that her cousin was dating him.
Yeah. So, like I said, the Supreme Court said that they were upholding the original conviction for Donita's kidnapping and rape, and he was finally sent to prison. He was sent to the Western New Mexico Correctional Facility in Grants to begin serving his sentence while awaiting trial for Dena's murder. His defense attorney, William Fry, was attempting to get a change of venue due to public outrage. And people were outraged because if he hadn't been bonded out of all of this stuff and also been told, stay out of Roswell, go be somebody else's problem, this wouldn't have happened, right? And so I read a quote from his defense attorney that says, it is a quantum leap to say, as the argument is developing now, that if the judge had never let Mr. Clark out on bond, the little girl would never have been killed. And, like, I know at this point he hasn't been convicted of Dena's murder, so innocent until proven guilty. But the whole fact of the matter is if he hadn't been released, if he had been sent to prison like he should have been sent, Dena wouldn't have been killed. And that's just all there is to that. I mean,
it's, cut and dry.
It very much is. So it was crazy, though, because even after his arrest, he had friends who were giving statements to the press saying that he didn't believe he was guilty of Donita's kidnapping and rape, and that the press was treating him unfairly and the publicity was unfair. Quote, because worse crimes happen all the time without all of the press. Like, so that doesn't make this less bad.
Right.
Plus, it was a 6-year-old little girl. So, and a 9-year-old little girl. So, but I mean, as far as the Donita one goes, because they all, like, he maintained his innocence on that until the very end. He said that he didn't do it. So I don't know, but he was convicted of it. So there's that. And in the meantime, Artesia and Roswell are reeling. And like we talked about at the beginning, there was a quote in the Artesia Daily News that said, "Parents fear for their children now. No longer does a child who wants to ride a bike to a friend's house a couple of blocks away receive an automatic yes." Which, again, we experienced firsthand. There were lots of protests being performed throughout the counties, trying to change the laws that allowed a convicted sex offender from being free on bail pending his appeals. Also, I learned that the law that makes it where you have to know that sex offenders live in your area is Megan's Law. That didn't come out until 1996. So even at this point, even then, like, you wouldn't have known because there was no registry. You didn't have to tell people. And he wasn't living in the area anyway. So, I don't know that would have done anything anyway.
Right, because he wasn't living, like, in close proximity to the area where it happened.
Right.
He drove all the way into town to do it.
Exactly. So his preliminary hearing began Tuesday, August 9th, 1986. An expert from the state crime lab testified that because Dena's body had been so badly decomposed when she was found, it was estimated that she had been dead for 4 days to a week when she was found, and she was missing for 5 days. Another expert testified that the rope taken from Terry's truck matched the rope on Dena's ankle. And at the end of the preliminary hearing, Magistrate Billy V. Carpenter ruled that Clark would stand trial for first-degree murder and was ordered bound over for trial. He was also eligible for the death penalty, which I know we talked about already. October 9th, 1986, the state Supreme Court changed rules allowing for the unconditional release of a convicted offender appealing his or her case. So that was one good thing that came out of all of that. The new rule gave district judges authority to deny release if there was a flight risk or if the offender posed a danger to people in the community. Governor Tony Anaya at the time, he was a Democrat governor. He was known to be very liberal and anti-death penalty. On November 27th, he commuted all the death convictions for all of the people who were currently on death row. There were like 5 of them. So that was November 27th, right? So a few days later, December 4th, Terry Clark pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder and kidnapping of Dena Gore, which surprised everybody because, so what happened was that Governor Anaya was about to leave office. He had already been, he's at the end of his term. Another governor's already been elected. Governor Anaya commutes all of these death sentences. And so the plan with Terry Clark and his attorneys, where he would plead guilty, he would be sentenced to the death penalty, and then the governor would commute his sentence to life in prison. So they were trying to finagle this so that he didn't get the death sentence. So the judge, though, decided, was on to their scheme. And he told the defense team that the earliest Clark would be sentenced would be the end of January, which was after Tony and I left office. And the defense team was mad, and they tried to appeal it, and they were like, no, you have to give us a quick and speedy, sentencing or whatever. But that was denied by the Supreme Court. So the sentencing hearing began on April 26, 1987. The medical examiner detailed the state of Dena's body when she was found. The defense team introduced their theory that Clark had actually suffered a head injury right before assaulting Donita Welch that altered his entire personality.
He bumped his head.
Bro, he bonked his head on the roof of his car.
I do that all the time, and
You haven't murdered anybody yet?
No one.
So, yeah, he bonked his head on his car, and apparently that turned him into a murderer. So he also claimed that he was traumatized by an incident in the Navy where a young girl died in his arms while his ship was attempting to save them from pirates. So,
there are pirates.
There are pirates, but I went back. I found an article from 1979. It was in the newspaper under military news, and it talks about him and his, what do you call it? like the people you serve with. I don't know. Anyway, they rescued 3 boatloads of Vietnamese refugees in the South China Sea, but nothing talks about pirates. It just talks about finding these people, and some of them had been without water for weeks, and, but there was nothing about pirates.
The only word I can think of is battalion, but I don't know if
think
that's
it's
the correct word.
Wow, we are military people. Can you tell? So anyway, so that was all I could find. I didn't see anything talking about that he had saved people from pirates. So during his sentencing, they also called on Reverend Larry Foster, whom Clark had spoke to of his crimes. And Reverend Foster said that Clark asked him if he thought a person could be possessed by a demon, quote, because he said he had a terrible urge to see the child's genitals. He also admitted to the Reverend that he raped Dena, and then she started screaming, "You're going to pay for this." And so he, quote, panicked and reached inside of the car for a gun and shot her. Which I was just like, she was very feisty. Right. So at least she fought him.
Yes, at least she didn't just let it happen.
That's right. May 8th, 1987, Terry Clark was sentenced to death for the kidnap and murder of Dena Lynn Gore. The end. Just kidding. So even though he confessed to the murder to the court where he apologized to the Gore family, he confessed to a reverend. He gave an interview about how sorry he was for his crimes. In September of 1987, Terry Clark requested a new trial. You already said
I did it.
And in my humble opinion, if you're really sorry for murdering an innocent baby,
then you're willing to take your comeuppance.
Right. You caused a massive amount of trauma to this entire family. An entire community.
Town. I mean, obviously it's worse for the family, but you ruined an entire town and how they viewed letting their children.
Exactly. He changed how all parents in the community behave towards their children. You just shut your mouth and accept your sentence.
Yeah.
You did it. Yeah, but not Terry Clark.
No.
And
I mean, so often this happens.
Yeah, it does. And it's ridiculous. It's because again, he had the scheme, right? He was going to avoid the death penalty. Mm-hmm. Well, now he's got the death penalty, and so his scheme got messed up. In March 1989, the Supreme Court upheld his death sentence. In May 1991, he gave an interview to the Santa Fe Reporter, which was creepy. At this point, he starts to sort of deny that he did it, or at least he isn't taking responsibility for what happened. And he claims that on October 8th, 1984, talking about Donita Welch, that he stayed home sick that day. He said sheriff's deputies came to his house that afternoon investigating the rape of a 6-year-old girl. And that he states, quote, "I cooperated fully. I gave them a statement and everything. When this thing was supposed to happen, I was on the phone with my wife. They say the girl had got out of school about 2:45 in the afternoon. Supposedly she's walking along when a car stops and the driver makes her get in. He drives her way out in the country." And brace yourself because it's icky. He says, "All the guy used was his fingers on her. I'm not sure if that's rape or not." Actually, sir, it is. And you're gross for even saying that.
Right.
She's 6. She wasn't a consenting adult.
No.
She was a 6-year-old baby child. So he maintained his innocence on Donita's rape. He claimed the DA needed a scapegoat and went on to say, "I have been wrongfully convicted, losing my family and everything I owned, my job, my house. Boo-hoo-hoo. To be accused of such a terrible crime, I cannot comprehend that. I love kids.
Clearly.
I'm not a preyer on children," says the kidnapper and the raper and the murderer.
Says the predator.
Yeah. Of Dena, Clark stated, "Let's just say that with all the past events that occurred in my life that led up to this case, anything is possible. A lot of anger got misdirected at the wrong person. It wasn't like I said I was going to do this. I was at the wrong place at the wrong time." I'm sorry, you're an adult. "She was at the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm not even sure it happened, or I'm not even sure I did it," which is convenient after he confessed to it. They're saying I wasn't...
Well, he did bump his head.
He did bonk his nog. They're saying I wasn't going to let the second one go on to tell on me. Actually, you told the Reverend that. But that's all moot, man, because I'm not responsible for what happened to the first girl, nor am I responsible for what happened to the second. And I can only assume that he meant that if he hadn't been accused of the first crime, he wouldn't have done the second. I don't know. But Also, like, he was arrested. After he was arrested for her, it came out that he was chasing little girls around town. So, I don't know. So, like, he can't say that he didn't plan to do this because obviously
Right.
he was trying to find somebody to do this to. So, Dena probably was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but he took her because he wanted to, because he'd been trying to take little girls for a while. So in September 1994, the state Supreme Court overturned his death sentence and ordered that he be resentenced. It said that the jury should have been told beforehand that Clark would be behind bars until at least the age of 86 if given the alternative sentence of life in prison. And, like, I don't know.
Like, what does that matter?
Right. And so it says, apparently based on how the prosecution was arguing during the original sentence, the jury reasonably could have concluded that Clark would be on the streets in as little as 10 years at the age of 41 if he had been given life in prison. And this conclusion was incorrect. So, weird side story. So, on July 18th, 1995, in an issue of the Albuquerque Tribune, there was a front page headline that read, DA, killer wanted girl's dad dead. So apparently he had been soliciting somebody to murder Jeff Gore.
Okay.
Yeah. He attempted to hire 2 undercover police officers to kill Jeff Gore. He wrote a letter stating, I want to hire you to arrange for Mr. Gore to have a fatal accident, because he knew that Gore would have had a key role in getting him sentenced to death again. He told a fellow inmate that he wanted Gore out of the way. And then that dude told authorities, and then they set him up as a go-between for Clark and these, like, so-called hitmen. He agreed to a $10,000 fee with $5,000 up front and enclosed $200 in an envelope of earnest money. So then he was charged for criminal solicitation to commit first-degree murder. His new sentencing took place in 1996, where the jury returned a death sentence for the second time. And I guess they dropped the murder for hire charges after this because you never hear about him again.
Right.
So I guess they were like, well, he's being put to death anyways or whatever. For the next 3 years, Clark and his lawyer went back and forth appealing and deciding not to appeal and appealing and deciding not to appeal. And, like, Terry Clark would be like, okay, I'm ready to die. And then he would be like, never mind, I'm not ready to die. And it was just like, it went back and forth for way too long. So in March 2001, he decided he was ready to be executed again. So, and, like, to me, I just think, like, what a nightmare for Dena and Donita's families both. Like, that they're like, okay, Finally. And then now we have to go through this again. And okay, finally. And now we have to go through this again. On September 14th, 2001, courts denied the last-ditch appeal and set Clark's execution date for November 6, 2001. His last meal was fish and shrimp from Long John Silver's. He didn't want dessert, which I feel like also speaks to his character. So if I was going to die, I'd want all the dessert. Colleen and Jeff Gore were both in attendance, as well as Donita Welch and Clark's girlfriend, Jean Ortiz, which it already creeps me out when convicted murderers have girlfriends, because it's like, he's a convicted murderer. He murdered a little girl, like, gross. But also, I guess she was part of, like, this, like, charge to, like, the protest, like, to get him put behind bars, but then she wrote him a letter, and his letter back, like, made her feel sorry for him or something, and so then she became his girlfriend. So his last words were, quote, 15 minutes, which left a lot of people confused. Some people thought that it meant that he got his 15 minutes of fame. But apparently there was an idea in Dead Men Walking by Sister Helen Prigine that indicated that you would be in heaven in 15 minutes after death. He was the first inmate executed in New Mexico in 41 years, and he was the last. He was the only inmate that's been executed by lethal injection. So that is the story of Terry Clark. I have another fun fact for you, though. Okay. The old main prison where he was executed, it was also the site of the deadly prison riot. I don't know if you remember. Yeah. So it's now defunct.
Yes.
But they hold ghost tours.
The Ghost Bros go there? I feel like the Ghost Bros went there.
They might have gone there. They go lots of places.
They do. It's their job.
Look. I didn't even look, but
because I feel like, I mean, they did. I know they did a prison where there was a really terrible prison riot, and so
maybe.
But I don't know if it was that one or not.
They do ghost tours. It's kind of expensive. I think I looked at it, but yeah, I don't know. It might be worth checking out someday.
Yeah.
So that's the end of our first episode.
All right. Yeah.
How do you feel it went?
I think it went okay.
Kind of long.
Yeah, we went a little long, but
I guess it could have been longer.
could have been.
We didn't go on any tangents.
No, not really.
No. Guess that's good.
Stay tuned for future tangents. I'm
Absolutely.
sure once we get a little more comfortable with this, then there will be a lot more asides. But thanks for sticking in there with us on our very first recording.
Very first recording. Hopefully that was good. I had done like an insane amount of research to begin with, and then I felt like I didn't do it correctly, and I went back over it again. So
And then we sat on it for like 2 years.
And then we sat on it for 2 years. So I don't know. Hopefully everybody liked it. And we'll be back with another one.
Yep.
All right.
Not sure exactly what yet. Maybe something mysterious. Maybe another true crime case. But
We'll see.
we'll have something.
You'll have to listen to find out. Okay, I have no idea how we should end this.
Me either. We don't have like Patreons and things like that yet.
We don't have a fun tagline to say.
No.
Okay. Well, I guess for now we'll say goodbye. See you next time.
And remember that people are gross and don't get murdered.
That's right. Bye.